Well, good morning, Peter. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thanks. It's really an honor to be asked to join.
Well, Hirsh Precision has quite a legacy, even I think before you bought it and certainly since. So we'd love to dig in, learn more about yourself, learn more about Hirsh and the journey with both and how they've come together. So let's start with a little bit about yourself and maybe what Hirsh looks like today, and then we'll get into the backstory.
Okay, sure. Well, I am a little bit unique, I think, in the industry in terms of my path. I went to undergraduate at the Air Force Academy, and so my career started as an Air Force officer. And I lived and worked around the world for about 5.5 years before deciding that I wanted to go to graduate school. And around that same decision, decided that I wanted to serve the public good in the private sector. And so I left the Air Force and got an MBA, and then really actually had a wide variety of jobs, and had a stint in management consulting. I worked at Deloitte for several years, and I traveled a lot. And all of that happened before I joined Hirsh Precision as the Chief Operating Officer in 2017.
Okay.
So that's a little bit about me. In terms of, where we are today, we're a precision machining company, and we recently relocated. We're located in Frederick, Colorado, which is just north of Denver now, in a 65,000 square foot facility. So we've just expanded into that from our previous facility. And we have a variety of different types of machining, 3, 4, and 5 axis, some mill turn, some Swiss, and we support a variety of industries. Most of what we do is medical within that space, but we also support, life sciences, aerospace, and some sort of scientific diagnostic equipment, industrial equipment, that kind of thing.
Okay. Sounds diverse, both in client base and in types of processes you do.
Yeah. There's challenges to that, but we enjoy it. And much of that has just grown through relationships, honestly. I think we've tried to stay focused on the customer, and what that has meant is that we grow where they need us to grow.
Right. Yeah. So you bought the business about 5 years ago. So it sounds like you worked for it for a couple of years and then decided to. Was that the plan originally when you joined with the previous owner, or did that evolve in your first couple of years working there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So at the time, I met Mike Hirsh. We met at Dark 30 or something in some Bible study, I think, in a coffee shop, and became friends. And every few months would stay in touch. We'd get breakfast together. And I remember working at Deloitte at the time. I was traveling, 120,000 miles a year plus. And Mike said, hey, have you ever thought about an operational role? I was thinking about, if I can't remember how he phrased it, looking back, but he said something like, I'm kind of working on whether I should hire a right-hand person to help. Would you be willing to help me write the job description? Well, over the course of the next, 3 to 6 months, I was no longer sort of a friend batting around ideas. I was not objective about the opportunity. I said, I think I've written my job description. Would you consider me for the role? And so I joined in early 2017. And it was not the plan at the time that I would purchase the company. Mike and I had a great relationship. He was an excellent fit and coach and mentor for me and what I needed at the time. I think I was also a really good fit at the time for the role that he needed. At the time, I was really strong in some areas that I think were helpful to the team. And then after a while, I remember Mike, was pleased with how things were going. I think when, I was a pretty significant outside hire for the company, I was actually Mike's only direct report when I was the chief operating officer. So different, leadership structures look different, but there was a significant amount of trust and responsibility that he was giving me. And sure. I think something around the first year that I'd been there, Mike said something like, I'd like to spend some more time with my wife. And it turns out my wife really enjoys Florida. And so,
okay.
How do you feel about that? And I think I chuckled because I thought he was joking about buying a one-way plane ticket. But he sort of said, listen, I trust you, and would you be willing to try that out? And so he would spend a little bit more time out of the office. And honestly, I think I felt so delighted and so honored to be a part of Hirsh that I was naturally drawn to see, what is there a way I could make this, company flourish in a better way. And I think Mike, I really give him a lot of credit because he did a lot for the company while he was here. He had a real heart for people and an appreciation of systems and an appreciation of culture. But he also, I think, knew that, succession planning and mentorship should be really intentional. And so, long story short, Mike and I began a very intentional discussion around what it might look like if I was to succeed him as the president and CEO. And fortunately, thanks to his wisdom at the time, I think we stewarded it pretty well. I will say, looking back 5 years ago, I don't think I knew what I was getting into. I think I understood the business okay, but the personal sort of crucible that owning a business involves was new. I don't think I anticipated that.
Yeah. And I would probably argue the owning a precision machining business, the hardest type of business in the world, in my opinion, that is talk about a crucible. Yeah. You're in the fire.
Yeah, there was a lot, but we had a vision that Hirsh was this wonderful company with some great ideals and should grow. And so I've pursued that, and we've grown, and it's been hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's good, but it's hard.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So I want to ask, what made you good at being the COO? Coming in, completely from the outside, not knowing the precision machining business. Usually, the general managers, operations managers, those types of folks that I have known, they usually come from the industry, so they know it really well. They can troubleshoot with the best of them. They know the nuance of problems that are happening, but you did not know those things. So what made you great at being a COO, and why was Mike so pleased with what you did? Can you share some of that?
Yeah, great question. And here he's not on the phone call, so I'm going to say he was really pleased with what I did. But I think so. There was a couple of things that Mike observed. He, most of our company leaders have grown up within the company. And so Hirsh is sort of most of what they've known and seen. And I think Mike thought if I bring in somebody from the outside, that might help the company grow. So that was one, is that we had a deep bench. And so the need for me to be deep in machining knowledge was lessened. The other thing is that, there's a good book called The First 90 Days by a guy named Michael Watkins, who's not the same Michael Watkins that runs Eva to Grow Systems, also a great guy. Yes. But the first 90 days talks about if you're hired into a leadership position, you don't want to be like a transplanted organ that is rejected by the organization. Absolutely. And I think I was pretty sensitive to that, given how strong Hirsh's culture was. And so I think that helped. But a lot of, I think the two things that I sort of naturally gravitated to that helped the team at the time was that I was pretty curious, and structure and execution was not, it just was the way I thought at the time. Now my perspective has evolved a little bit and broadened, not to say it's not essential, but at the time, I think there was some need or an opportunity to tighten up structure and execution that I helped facilitate. And so there was sort of a maturation of the leadership team that happened.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's, Mike had this idea that he would focus on strategy and culture, and I would focus on structure and execution. And so between those four elements, the two of us would work well together and have those essential elements covered.
Can you go into a little more detail on what you did to help with execution?
Mike handed me the EOS book, the traction book, relatively early in my time, and I had come out of Deloitte, and so I had mostly clients that were in sort of the Fortune 50, and Deloitte projects that I was engaged in were highly structured, and so. One of the things we did, we didn't hire an implementer for EOS, but we took a page out of that playbook and we established, a stronger weekly management meeting with good metrics and tried to establish a culture where issues were brought up and discussed. And it's actually been really interesting over the years in seasons where we've been a little bit softer on some of those disciplines or a little bit stronger. One of the things that we've had to learn how to do is at what point should an issue no longer be brought into this room, because it doesn't rise to the level of something the entire team needs to solve. Perhaps it's an individual's job, and we trust that individual to maybe keep everybody informed, but we don't need to spend time on it. So it's been, I think that's an ongoing process to figure out the right alignment.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about coming in as an outsider with a team that had grown up within the business. That can be a touchy thing, I know, but sounds like that book was instrumental in you sort of learning some of the concepts or theories or practices to make sure that you weren't the rejected organ.
Yeah, and in no way was I brought in to disrupt. Right. I mean, I think Mike was very conscientious about that. I have a huge amount of respect for the Hirsh family. There's 3 brothers that have been a part of it, and each brother's different, and each brother's been a great friend and mentor for me. I talked a little bit about Mike. Steve, our founder, Steve Hirsh, still works here. He's our director of engineering and sets a phenomenal example of listening to the customer and paying attention to details that are ultimately going to help the customer succeed, and what those details are that we need to be paying attention to. And then Kent Hirsh, who actually retired after 30 years, that was a really, really fun ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
But he had a very kind, gentle way of maintaining exceptionally high standards. So it kind of brought a nice. He was an exemplar for sure for me and others. So I was not brought in to disrupt anything in 2017 at all. In fact, I was drawn into the organization myself and wanted to be a part of it, and so aligning with it was natural for me.
Sounds like the Hirsh brothers had good parents, I'm guessing.
Oh man, just the other day we were talking with somebody who used to attend barbecues. They're a supplier of ours, and they used to attend barbecues at the Hirsh family residence, like back in the 80s, that the company had. Back when a barbecue was just, I don't know, 3 people or 5 people. The supplier would get invited as well, and that kind of thing. And so it's. Yes, they've been. I think the Hirsh family moved to the area in the 60s, if I recall.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome.
So they've been around for a while.
Yeah, there are so many amazing businesses all throughout this nation that are typically start family run, multi-generational often, with just the best people in the world. It's so
Yeah,
awesome that you fell into that.
it's funny when people talk about mom and pop businesses, that phrase is sometimes, I don't know if tongue in cheek is the right way to say it, but it's almost used to delineate like something that might be unsophisticated or small. And sometimes it can mean that, but there's also things that smaller companies do so much better than larger corporations. And there are mountains of business books that have been written for these larger corporations so that they can mimic the kinds of things that you would normally experience in a smaller organization. So I think on another episode, Matt Wardle mentioned, the Small Giants book, which is a great one. I think the Hirsh family was really intentional about culture, and so that's important.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I want to go in so many different directions. So I want to talk about the growth and how you've done that. But before we move into that area, let's talk about that culture. I imagine it was a very family feel to the business from the Hirsh family. But yeah, what was it like? What have you reinforced? What have you added in your tenure?
Well, it was family oriented, and I would say it still is. But there's a couple aspects that I think they did really well, and we try to do today. There's a culture of individual responsibility, I think, that your word should be your bond. Mm-hmm. It's one of our core values, to be honest and trustworthy. And frankly, as the owner, obviously, it's critical that I exemplify the core values. And the biggest risk to being honest and trustworthy is not malintent, but being overscheduled or overcommitted. And so one of the things that the Hirsh family was excellent at is just understanding how to make a commitment that they and the company can keep. I think most spouses and children of the Hirsh family, or at least the brothers that were involved, ended up working at the company over the years. There's stories before I arrived of, the kids picking weeds in the, business's parking lot on the weekend. Mm-hmm. And so that always sort of soaked into the DNA. One of the early stories I remember when Steve started, the business picked up, and Steve really started the company with a focus around quality work delivered on time. That was the motto. That was the DNA. And, most of the first several years were just focused on developing, really quality processes. But he invited his brother Mike in, and they got busy enough at some point that we were in a small garage in North Boulder, Colorado at the time. And they would, between Steve and Mike, run a 12-hour shift to get 24 hours of coverage, and they would just sleep on a pallet overnight in order to get the job done. And so there's this personal ownership and level of commitment that has soaked into the DNA. And I think in the most, the starting point for Hirsh has been around the hiring process and making sure, I think, that we attracted people of character. Mm-hmm. I think we've been very fortunate in that, but the culture was intentional. We wanted, to a team that wanted to deliver quality work on time, and we wanted a culture of continuous improvement. We wanted a culture of integrity. We wanted a fun, fast-paced environment. So it was kind of mixing a few different concepts there. Mm-hmm. Today, I would say the culture is largely the same. Our growth has challenged our culture. Our revenue has grown almost 80% over the past 2 years. And as we've hired, a greater proportion of the team is newer to the company. Mm-hmm. And on average, employees have been with us for about 10 years. And so that has been a challenge, and we're eager to guard that. And I haven't really aimed to change the culture. There are a couple of concepts that I've tried to emphasize around agility and customer focus.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say, I loved the culture when I arrived, and I'm hoping the team and I can sustain it.
Right. So to focus for a second on that our growth has challenged our culture, is it really about just onboarding so many new people at a fast pace and trying to get them fully kind of embedded in the culture? Or is it that thing about, malintent versus being overscheduled? And so when you're growing at that rate, it's hard to not get overscheduled. And so therefore that core value of your word is your bond might be harder to stick to. And so therefore that causes some consternation or strife.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not growing, it's really easy to be on time.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not growing, why would you not be on time for the most part, right? I mean, you ought to be able to figure that out. Whereas the pace of change over the past couple of years, we grew, completed a facility construction project, and moved the company simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a lot to bite off.
No kidding.
So I would say, onboarding is one of the factors. And I would say you're talking to me in a really interesting season because of how much we've bitten off. I remember a few years ago when some other leaders in the industry, said it is entirely possible to grow too fast. And I kind of didn't believe them. I kind of thought, well, it's probably fun though, right? I mean, we should probably try. And now on the other side of what we've been through, I can tell you they were 100% correct. It is entirely possible to grow too fast. And the humbling part about it is that from a leadership standpoint, the ground shifts beneath your feet.
Right.
You don't realize your own blind spots until they're sort of in the rearview mirror. And those lessons that you've had to learn yourself directly are so much more potent and sticky than the ones somebody else tells you, right? Or reading a book about it. It's not the same. So I think the pace of change has been the largest challenge to the culture. And frankly, we're still figuring out exactly all of the lessons learned. I remember I do read a lot, and I remember resonating with something in the Scaling Up book that leadership, that's by Vern Harnish, which I think used to be called the Rockefeller Habits or something. But in there, I think it talks about how leadership development is one of the most critical enablers of growth. And when you come from a sort of a job shop mentality, we tend to focus on utilization. And so this idea that the most important place for people in the organization to have room in their schedules is actually at the top. And I perceived my role, honestly, as a little bit like the first car in line. If I'm stuck, if I'm not growing and learning, then a traffic jam forms behind me and it piles up. Career opportunities are limited, leadership development down the organization is limited, and we're relatively flat. But my thinking really has tried to prioritize me demonstrating what it looks like to move out of my comfort zone into the next level of leadership, identifying the diverse leaders on our team who can fill unique positions, and then hoping that cascades down in the organization, and that on the shop floor the same dynamic is happening. But that's an ongoing process. We're still figuring out how do we set everybody up for success. everybody has a different vision for their own, work life and things that they want to, pursue. And so we're still tuning that leadership development engine.
I was going to ask, how do you convey the learning journey that you're on with reading all the books and not creating that traffic jam behind you? How do you convey that to your leaders, to the team?
I think the culture of continuous improvement provides an environment where you can try things. So if I have an idea, I try to make it okay to simply begin in that direction. What if we tried it this way, for this new part or for this meeting? What if we did it, slightly differently? And then we'll just discuss if that worked. One of the things that I think I've had to learn to be better about is being decisive and moving quickly. And so if it's okay to try things and if it's okay to fail, then hopefully that leads to a culture of learning.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it does strike me that if a culture of continuous improvement can truly be like embedded at the DNA level of a business, that is like the mechanism for almost all the things you're talking about, right? Your own growth, the growth of your leaders, the process improvement.
My hope is that if your workplace encourages you to make choices, your life's going to be better. Mm-hmm. The more you practice proactively making choices and engaging as opposed to falling into habits, the more you do just naturally grow personally and professionally, I think. Mm-hmm. So I totally agree. There's a lot of benefits, not just to the company, but on an individual level.
Right. Huh. Well, if people didn't have pen and paper before they started listening to this, I'm sure they've scrambled to grab it if they're not driving in their car, because you were dropping some amazing wisdom. Let's shift for a moment and talk about the growth. 80%, is that what you said? Growth in a couple of years is crazy. How have you been fortunate to just be serving industries that happen to have organic demand that's growing, or are you adding new customers? What are you doing to grow like that?
Well, I remember when I purchased the company, there was a lot of momentum. And I remember perceiving my job as being just to add a log to the fire, just to sort of keep it going, same direction, but to facilitate it. And I came up with this idea, which ended up being a little bit like throwing a stick of dynamite into the fire. I had this idea that I never want our company to be the reason why our customers can't grow. So our job is not to get back to the customer with this buffet of reasons why no is the answer, but our job is to figure out how do we say yes, right? And I think many other small business owners strive to go in that same direction. But of course, there are some sensible limits that relate to just the extent you will go to for a customer. And so one of the things we've never had prior to, I guess, 2019 was kind of a real sales and marketing effort. We were relying just on word of mouth referrals. Yeah. And I ended up putting some effort into business development, which was effective. It changed the culture. It increased our visibility, I think, and it certainly helped. But the primary reason for our growth has been related to some existing customers, some longtime customers, who came to us because they knew we were focused on, they were struggling with yield at another supplier, and they knew that the Hirsh team, was one to pay attention to the details, and so they asked for our help. And it was a significant project. We had planned to expand the building, but we accelerated that plan by 15 months. and we opened the building in 90 days and began shipping parts out of that new building in 6 weeks.
Wow.
We purchased millions of dollars of new equipment, which we installed and calibrated in that 90-day period. We hired a number of additional team members and trained them quickly on how to respond. And so we sort of took steps that not very many companies would have taken to get the job done. And, I've always wanted to encourage agility, but that was
That's
a challenge.
extreme agility.
Yeah, it was the only building that was available and suitable for the purpose. We had found it in advance, and it just happened that we could figure it all out. But negotiating the lease or something in a week and just moving quickly was unique. So,
wow.
For anybody that's been in the industry for a long time, I'm sure everybody's been through an opportunity like that. And of course you can come down the other side. And that's what's happened is it was harder than we thought. It was more challenging than we thought. It took longer than we thought. And oh my gosh, I am so grateful. We have done an amazing job, but it really did challenge us. And so we've got lots of lessons learned that we wouldn't have learned had we not pursued it. But, we should talk again in a year. So I can share, here's kind of how we've implemented some of these changes and some of these things.
When was that?
Everything.
Yeah. How recent was that facility move and that crazy ramp up?
So it started in early 2022, and we had to run 24/7 production simultaneously as the building was under construction. And so we separated the production from the construction dust with a temporary wall. And that started in kind of late 2022 and carried through for several months. And then the move happened as construction was finishing up. And so we moved from our old 24,000 square foot facility in some phases. And that was done about a year ago. That was completed about a year ago.
Okay.
So we've been in the new facility for a year, and it's certainly starting to feel like home. Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful space. Mm-hmm. We're really excited about it. But there was a lot going on. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, so I imagine, we talk about diversity of industries, but also diversity of clients, and I imagine it sounds like that client swelled to a pretty large percentage of your business, at least for a while.
Yeah.
Are you working to grow other parts of the business to balance that out, or what's your philosophy around that?
Yes. Yeah. Our target is that no customer represents more than 20% of the business, and that the top 3 don't comprise more than 50%. So we're not quite there yet. But we have an excellent relationship with that customer. Obviously, we take care of them and they take care of us. Mm-hmm. And I think we try to manage it in a prudent way so that it's not a liability for either company, but an asset.
Right.
I guess that's how I would describe it.
Sounds like a smart way to go. Yeah. Okay, good. Having to hire that many folks that quickly, had you already had sort of workforce development things, have your fingers in local tech schools, or any advice or things on how you were able to do that so quickly?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good question. We certainly have partnerships with local schools, right? We help, as they make curriculum decisions, and we visit, we provide tours, we open up internships and hire from local schools. In some cases, the roles we needed were in secondary operations, and so you're looking for attention to detail and integrity and sort of reliability, but maybe not as much technical experience running a machine, and so that was just a factor of the project. We did have I think one of the things that helped is that we dedicated leadership that had been with the company for quite some time to the new project. And so that helped set the tone. I think if we were to hire leaders from the outside, on short notice, it would be tougher.
Yeah.
One of the things that we tried to be intentional about, for a while there, we were operating out of 3 different facilities before we consolidated into one. So we had an assembly facility in a separate town, and then a machining facility, and then this kind of new project facility. And so I was ping-ponging around, checking in with people and kind of sharing some of the, DNA of the company. And our culture guide talks about the importance of relationships. And one of the things I've done is I have kind of like a 1-page guide to the company that folds up and fits in our little ID card holders.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were hiring, cohorts of newcomers, I'd buy everybody lunch and sit down with everybody and say, okay, you're joining the company at this point in the stream. You're going to have a common ground because you've seen us at this moment. And so I want to level set on who we are, but then I also want to encourage you as fellow newcomers with each other to, share notes. And, you're the fresh eyes of the organization. If you see anything that we can do better, please let us know. And that also helped them understand that I'm accessible, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I may be busy, but we have that kind of culture. And one of the things that we cover in that meeting on that sheet of paper is that there's a section, and it says, what are your top 10 key relationships? And so within the first 3 months, my ask of newcomers was write down the names of the people who you think are the most important people for you to get to know at the company. And so when we were onboarding, I just wanted people to understand, well, I joined Hirsh so that I could be a programmer, or I joined so that I could, I just want to be on a great team. And so they'd write down, their manager was like one of the required names, but there would be a variety of people. Some people wanted to meet with Steve, the founder. Some people would, they would just come up with whatever names. Maybe you want to meet other people who hunt or whatever it is. But that prompt, I think, helped us establish some relational harmony and was helpful.
That's a really cool idea.
I mean, there's probably some other things that we did, but that's one of the things that come to mind.
So before we move on, because this is just such a critical topic, how have you been successful recruiting for values, for fit, for culture, and for things like attention to detail? Like, what's the process for the interview and for vetting to make sure those folks are going to land and you're choosing the right ones?
Yeah. We try to help people relax during the interview. And we try to set a tone where they can just be themselves. I don't want anybody working at the company who doesn't want to work at the company. There's all kinds of jobs out there, and nobody's obligated, right? I mean, nobody's conscripted to work any one place or to spend their time in any one way. And so I really try to encourage people, just take the pressure off, get to know us, get to know yourself. If you're totally new to manufacturing, especially, take your time, ask questions. And I think that helps sort of take some of the artificiality out of the interviewing process. Mm-hmm. I think that helps. References obviously can help. Our best referrals come from inside the company. Mm-hmm. One of the most interesting dynamics is when a parent recommends that the company hire one of their children, because,
okay.
you know that it really matters to them if their child has a job. And it's a real compliment that they would suggest to another family member that, we might be a place where they would want to work. But you also know that the parent knows they're kind of on the hook here.
Yeah.
And so just
sure.
managing that, it's like an informal onboarding buddy or something. And we always tell the parent, listen, how we're going to treat your child like an adult. They're going to get a fair shake. They're going to get clear feedback and clear expectations. But equally, we also know that you're going to help us make sure that they get it.
Right.
I don't, obviously we don't set any formal expectations, but it's just natural, right?
Yeah.
And the number of times where the company has not necessarily seen that maybe, the onboarding process is going smoothly and the parent, basically says, hey, this is actually how it's done, or provides that nudge is really fun to watch.
Right.
But it's a great group of people here. We're fortunate.
Yeah. How you mentioned feedback and guidance of their expectations. What's the system you have for providing feedback and setting expectations? Yeah.
Well,
one-on-one meetings.
We have an annual performance review.
Okay.
And so every year, at least, there's one of those, and we try to do a mid-year as well. I would probably say today most of our feedback is informal. It's given on a day-to-day basis. We have a lot of metrics, and the general expectation, like, if I'm honest, I think we have too many, and I think we're probably at a stage where we need to start trimming and simplifying. But my general expectation for everyone is to live out the core values, which will allow you, we have 3, to be honest and trustworthy, passionate and productive, and loyal and committed. And so I think if you're passionate and productive, that speaks to your attitude and your willingness to study the business with us. We think it's good for people to understand how we make money. And so the baseline expectation these days, when we have so much going on, is that people are willing to hold themselves accountable to a full day's work. And in some cases, that, like for a direct labor type team member, there's lots of time transactions around that. But of course, for some of the other roles that might be more office staff, there's that same expectation, just to make sure that we're setting up the team for success and that people are using their time fully. It sets a good example. So there's some broad expectations, and then there's role specific, job descriptions and expectations and feedback that we give. Mechanically, it happens over about a 2-month process in the fall each year before our compensation review.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned it's important for employees to know how you make money. Are you transparent, or how transparent are you about how the company's doing financially? Do you share, high level numbers? Where do you fall on that?
Yeah, I think right now, probably the top third of the organization is a little bit more well-versed in the concept of what goes into cost of goods sold. So one of the things, I may not have mentioned, there was a stint where I sort of grew up through the finance function. And so I've always been pretty comfortable with the numbers. And so I think about a third of the organization has pretty detailed real-time access to the things that determine gross margin. With the broader team, most of what is shared are production metrics that relate to them. And so they, one of the things that's unique about us is that we have our own software. And so people come in and they clock into that software, and they have an ability to set goals in the software, and then they clock their time throughout the day. And when they sign out, they see the goals that they set, and then they see their actual time transactions. And so it's just this slight nudge towards transparency for them about how their time is being used. Maybe any time that they lost, right? And we want to discover how can we help you, use your time more fully. But then they also see if their goals didn't quite line up with how they actually spent their time. So if somebody says, I want to learn how to run that 5-axis machine, and day after day after day, they're just running operating a 4-axis machine. It's a prompt for them to say, okay, now hold on, I should go talk to so-and-so about that,
Right.
and see how to get back on track. That's our hope.
Wow.
It's not required. It's not tracked. It's just this tiny little nudge towards, hey, we do want continuous improvement to happen, sort of organically. It's like we want it to be in the water. So
I'm taking notes. That's a really cool idea.
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask, so are the goals more subjective? Like I want to learn how to run the 5-axis, or like I want to hit 90% of my time on work orders today, or both, or whatever?
Yes, it's both. And,
Okay.
it's really just to highlight, again, there's these fundamental ideas of, if you live out the core values at work, you're actually going to be a better family member, right? Brother, sister, son, father, spouse, whatever it is. If you proactively make choices and know how your time is being used, it's this little nudge towards intentionality around life, which I really love. And I think a little bit of reflection does us all good.
Mm-hmm.
But it's subjective. It's totally open. People can, put anything down. So, and I'll say while we're talking, I think your story, Paul, is so cool. I have to say, even though I'm really proud of our software and it works well for us, there's a couple people here who have kind of like pro shop FOMO, and we see, what's been happening and the momentum around it. And I think there's a lot of cultural alignment between how you approach running a high quality machining organization and how we try to. So I'm really happy to see the growth, and obviously I wish you the very best. Hope it continues.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that's such a neat idea to set that in a way to personalize, because people will try harder for things that they are a part of and believe in and have, skin in the game. And even just setting a personal goal is such a cool idea. So do you have a patent on that?
I think the software is, but listen, if you want to collaborate, I'm happy to.
That is, yeah.
But I'll tell you, I think, especially because most of the work we do is repeat production work, there is always that risk of just falling into habits.
Yeah.
And great habits are powerful. There's nothing wrong with them, but you want to make sure that they're the right ones, and so that's also, I think, been helpful. I would imagine that if you're in mostly a prototype environment and every day you might be making, something different, or every couple of days, it'll probably be a little bit easier to, find that time to, figure out what's working well and what's not. But sometimes if you're just in the flow, it can be harder.
I would almost argue it's the opposite. If you're, we did both at our company at ProCNC. We had a exclusive prototype department and we had our production department. And when you're getting hit with brand new part numbers every day and trying to figure out how to program them, how to fixture them, how to troubleshoot problems, it's so intensive that, just trying to get your head above water to think about something like process improvement is hard to do. And when you have a repeat job and it's sort of running, smoothly because you got your processes all dialed in, that's when, an employee can, assuming you've instilled this into the culture and trained them, like we trained all our employees on the 8 wastes of the Toyota production system or whatever. And And so they knew to look for those. And they're like, hey, I keep walking from here all the way over there, like every cycle. And so they would go to the Kaizen newspaper board and write down, I got motion here and I'm doing this thing. And, but they had time to do that because they were just kind of monitoring and maintaining a production flow. So, we did Kaizen in all departments, quite effectively. I'll give full credit to my partner, Kelsey, who really led that and was our champion for many years. But yeah, I mean, it's the most important part is to instill it into the people at the lowest level of the company. And that's not to demean the positions, but they're executing every day, making the parts, doing the things. If they know what waste is, they can identify it. And I guess the real trick is to instill in everybody that you want to stamp it out. You want to eliminate it. That's where that continuous improvement culture and sort of mindset can be so powerful when everyone is excited. I found a waste. Let me write that down. And then the team's going to tackle it and I'll contribute. And, and then we celebrate and have pizza parties or, profit sharing or whatever. Right.
There's two things that I think have been really helpful for us. One is that continuous improvement ideas can be submitted through the software. I'm sure you've got, something similar. And so everybody has something very close to their fingertips where they can submit a suggestion. And then the other is that at the end of our daily Gemba meetings, we ask, what can we do to help you today for the presenter, who's typically the cell lead, but sometimes it rotates. And I think that helps everybody, management and, the production cells, understand what the goals are, right? The goals are to keep the machines running and to make it easier to do so. And so that prompt is a good habit.
Mm-hmm. So do you feel like you have a pretty strong culture of servant leadership there? It sounds like that question is very much sort of aligned to that. It's like the leaders are here to help make sure that people running machines have everything they need to be effective.
I absolutely feel as though that's my job, is to help the team succeed. The team is the group who supports the customer. Every day, it's not me that's directly supporting the customer's needs, right? It's our team that's actually producing the work. So I absolutely agree with that. And I think that there's the only thing that I would add to the idea of servant leadership is that the team also expects, especially in high growth seasons, a clear strategy and like a well-articulated path forward, which needs to come from leadership. So if the top of the organization only says, what do you need? How can I help you? It's possible that some of the more strategic moves, aren't discussed enough. And that's been one of the balances we need to strike, because I think the team deserves and needs both. You can, the team wants clarity on the priority and the balance that they need to be striking. So,
yeah, that's a great nuance. Yeah, completely agree with that. You mentioned metrics and maybe having too many of them. Can you describe maybe some of them, or the ones you might be kicking to the curb because they're not as, they're inclusive of another one maybe, or yeah.
Well, I feel like ever since I joined the industry, metrics have been a topic of conversation, whether it's machine monitoring or encouraging people to measure certain business metrics. And so we've got all of the ones that you would expect. I mean, every box that goes out the door, we know how many pennies we made on that job, right? We've got on-time delivery, we've got scrap, we've got all the standards. Some of the ones that, or one of our good decisions is we decided to move our Microsoft Office platform into the cloud, and that gave us Power BI. And then we had some, I myself feel like I'm kind of a recovering analyst, and we've got some strong analysts on our team. And so that really hit the gas. And now we just have access into everything. And it can be a little overwhelming, and you don't want to spend time figuring out how to reconcile numbers or why the data says what it is. You want to figure out why the data says what it is, not justify the number itself. So, so I think Power BI, especially in some of the data analytics platforms, can invite a proliferation of reports that need to be rationalized because there's a lot of different ways to slice and dice a business that's as complex as machining. Some of the metrics that I think have been healthy for us and might be a little bit more unique. We have a leading indicator of which orders are projecting late, and we track that pretty regularly and in detail.
Yep.
And we have, more detailed metrics lately on quoting, like our book to bill ratio. So we know, what that's looking like over time. We have, things we can do to improve but I would characterize our data structure today as, very broad, very complete. And I think at some point when we can, one of our quarterly kind of big rocks is going to be figuring out how to get back towards ownership of a metric at the right level in the organization. And so people feel like they know when they're winning or losing. They can take specific actions to address a metric that they know they have control over. We want decisions to be made at the lowest qualified level in the company. And so I think that kind of rationalization of the data and streamlining will likely be helpful in implementing that kind of culture. I love giving people a chance to make more decisions because I think there's risk involved, and it feels so good when you make a risky decision and you have loyal teammates. And it is, as long as it's not going to, disrupt the customer. Like I said before, I think the lessons you learn from the decisions you yourself make are so much more potent than being part of a team where somebody else is making the decisions. So it's part of developing a more agile culture and a culture of continuous improvement to give people permission to try things. I think that's really important.
I love that so much. Awesome. Well, as we probably look to wrap up here, I know you have a hard stop here soon. What would be your best advice for shops that are earlier on in their journey if they aspire to be like a Hirsh Precision one day?
Well, everybody's going to know after I open my mouth that they can do it. It's a process of learning. I would say the best thing you can do for your company to begin with is simply be honest and be competent. Once you get technical, once you're committed to honesty in the small things and the big things, and once you're technically competent, you've got some real building blocks. I would say keep learning, however that looks like for you. If it's podcasts or books or mentors, stay hungry. Find ways to guard your mindset. Don't let a single email throw you off track or a single conversation. If you own a company, you're going to have good days and bad days. You have to keep that running list of the things that are going well and that you're grateful for. You have to stay buoyant and resilient. And you have to know yourself very well if you're going to build a good team around you. I once heard, continuing to act as if you don't need a team is an anti-growth mentality. And I like that. So I think knowing yourself and what alloy you are, what you're made of, what your metallurgical properties are, so to speak, will really help you hire well. So those are the couple of things that I would share.
I love what alloy you are. That is so perfect for our industry. That is fantastic.
Yeah, everybody behaves differently in different, circumstances under different strains and pressures and temperatures. So,
oh man. Well, Peter, you are clearly both humble and very wise and studied. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your journey and your experience. I know I have a ton of notes from our conversation. I learn from my guests all the time, and I've learned a ton from you today. So thank you so much for spending your time to share with us. I know the audience will get a lot from this today. So I'm just grateful for the time that you've given us.
Well, thank you very much for what you're doing in the industry, both through ProShop and through the podcast. I'm really grateful to have so many people who have helped me on the journey, and you are, meeting me after a doozy of a couple of years, and so look forward to staying in touch. And I'll certainly be listening to the episodes that you create in the future.
Awesome, Peter. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And we'll talk to you before too long. Cheers.
All right. Sounds good. Take care.
Bye.